rotor blades. So rotor blades are black and they have yellow tips, as per most helicopters. That's not a coloured tip, so you know where the end is. They've also got these yellow bands, which are supplied by Dackles. As you can see, I've put the Dackles, or used Dackles, which means they are on the model. I will come back to that later when they are dry and show you. I'm going to paint these yellow strips. Nothing wrong with the Dackles, but Dackles like these, you got the carrier film in between. To eliminate that, I will use cut strips using this Infinity Easy Cutting Mat Type A, so it's all lines. It goes from 1 mil down to 0.4 mil. So I'll measure the line, how thick they are, and the gap in between, and I can just cut that exact measurement for that gap, and then just put the strips either side, and then mask it off and spray them in. It'll look better than the Dackles, and I got to paint the tips anyway, so it'll be uniform color. So for the black, my base color will be NATO black. I usually use that, but as with the filters and the engines, that's a focal point on a helicopter, especially this one. Your rotor blades are as well. When it's sitting on a display table, people are going to look at the top of the aircraft. So I need to add something to these blades. There's 6 of them. Just plain black is just not going to cut it. So I'm going to break it up. I'm going to spray NATO black, and then I'll probably go where the panel lines are. I'll post shade with flat black, and you can see there's a big difference in the color. So I might have to tone it down again, might have to mix both, and then I'm gonna, in the center, I'll randomly spray in the center of all those panel lines. I'll probably do like a dark grey or something to suggest fading, as they were in a harsh environment. But this is my thoughts of where I'm going. If I end up there, that may change, but I'll explain what I did when we get there. Okay, so I made a start. So I did the NATO black, like I said, and I've taped off and painted the yellow ends, the tip and the stripes on the blades further down. I've made them so I didn't saturate with yellow. I've sort of mottled it to give it a look of wearing, worn, or dirty looking. Next up, I have to put, I noticed these Dackles, 6 of them, so I figured they were for the rotor blades, but the instructions don't show them. So I was just going to leave them off, but when I was looking at rotor head images on Google, I found an image with these markings are on the underside of the rotor blade. So if you're on the ground looking up, you'll see them, they're not on top. So I'm going to add them before I do the other weathering I talked about with the different shades of black. I've also, this is the stabilizer. I've primed it grey. The stabilizer, as you can see, is orange. That's the underside. That's pretty. I did on top. I did that with the scourer. I did brown and yellow. On the underside, I just did brown. And to me, I can see the difference, but probably can't pick it up on camera. But that's the underside anyway. I don't want it as obvious. The top, I did some brown and yellow over grey. Now I'm using grey because I don't, if you want a bright orange or a bright yellow, a bright red, use white as your base coat, but I don't want it bright because it's not going to go with the rest of the aircraft because it's weathered and starting to wear, looking worn. So I'm using grey as the base coat, and I did the yellow and brown splotches over that. Now I'll spray the orange on top of that, and that'll be a bit duller than if you use white. Okay, so with the markings, originally I was going to do the 101st Airborne. I mean, who doesn't like the Screaming Eagles, right? But I opted for the other markings, which is 273rd Assault Support Helicopter Company, 1968, Vietnam. And the sole reason I ended up doing it was because this aircraft it's got a name, and it's Tiny Tim. I thought that's a nice touch for this monstrosity. So that's the sole reason I went with that. So the decals, there's not many. They're on. They're thin and they work well, but you have to remember that the model is raised rivets and they're pretty pronounced. So like if we have a look here, the unit marking insignia, that went down really well, and you can see where I've rolled, when I put them down, you roll the cotton bud over it to get the water out. They've already started to wear through the rivets, which is fine. That just adds dimension to weathering. The tail was difficult because there's so many rivets and there's like a plate section there. Now the arrow's straight, and when I look at it, the E and the R kind of look like they're not straight, but depends on what angle you're looking at it. It's straight, but it's you're getting deflection off rivet heads and whatnot. The United States Army and the aircraft number, they were on the instructions. They're located more central to that panel, but that's not going to work with all these. There's an air scoop there, another pronounced bump there, and there's still parts got to be glued on there. So I've just done it my way, so to speak, put them in where they fit best. I don't think it's such a big deal myself, but others might. But again, they went down all right. You just got to keep working it to make sure because of the rivets are raised so high when sometimes when you roll over, the decal shifts, so I had to put water in it again, rehydrate it, and then straighten it up again and do it. These decals require a gloss coat yet. This is just the decals after they've been put on and set. They haven't had a gloss coat yet. That's not glued either, that's why that's moving. I used this, it's pretty much my go-to now, Agama Hypersol. I do use Microsol. If I'm using a brand of decals I'm not certain about, I start with this. And if I have difficulties, like it's taking a while to work, I go to this. This stuff is just near acid. When you put it on your decals, don't go back over and rub it again. It'll just eat your decal and your paint away. So you put it on, put the solution on it and leave it, walk away. Don't touch it till it's dry. You can use it again after it's dry. Don't keep coming on and putting it on when it's wet, because it just melts your decal and it'll melt your paint. So that's where we're at, and I've still working on the rotor blades. I've put those decals on I mentioned on the underside, and I've painted the upper surface of that stabilizer. I'm not sure if it's shown properly, but the hues changed where I did the yellow and brown splotches. So that's interesting. It'll add an interest of colour to the olive drab aircraft. So that's where we're at.